So what I've done with the slides is there are Excel slides in there. So Poppy, you might find those helpful for your data, and everyone else might find them helpful. With the testable files, you don't really have to use the Excel tips because Testable is really good at sorting the data for you. And maybe some of the testable stuff, Poppy, you might find interesting and may be able to use it across your data. We'll see. So let me go. Okay, so we need your data to be organized because there's a potential that the data will be used later on. So in our case, for UWA, Saba will need the full record. Not sure about Linda's side of things, if it's Linda that needs a full record. So just make sure that your data is there and it's neat. And in our case for UWA, the school does often need a record of it. So make sure you document everything and go overboard. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to keep your data log nice and overboard, if you want to use that term. Please don't work directly from USBs with your data. USBs have a reputation for failing, so it will just crash or you can lose them. So making sure that your data is on a computer. You also need to remember your ethics in case ethics is specific about where you store your data. So for UWA ethics, my understanding is that most of them say the data has to be kept on UWA protected machinery. So you might not be able to have it on a USB, like a portable device. So just be aware of your ethics and don't use USBs in general. We're going to talk about version numbers, but you need to keep updating them if you're changing versions. And make sure you use version numbers because it can get very confusing and you need to refer back to your versions in your data log. Yes, when you have incomplete data sheets, you need to keep them clearly labeled away from your complete data sheets. So using folders and subfolders is the best way to do it, making sure that you clearly label them. And you need to record reasons why you excluded participants, of course, so that will be part of your data log. And then that way, between versions, if you have different number of participants, you can go back and see why you have different number of participants and just make sure everything is clearly labeled. So when you keep a data log, it's up to you whether you want to do paper-based. I prefer electronic, so I use a text file and do my data log in a text file, and I save it to the folder where I'm working on it. So I have a data log for SPSS, I have a data log for Jamovi, and I have a data log for Excel. I just find it easier to organize it like that, but you might just have one full data log. So what you want to do is provide reasons why you did certain analyses or certain designs, who you included or excluded and why, as well as what you ran, like what analysis you ran and what was the output, where can you find that output. We're going to talk about SPSS and Jamovi in these slides. I'm a Jamovi person. I love Jamovi. Some people might still prefer SPSS, so that's fine. I've left the SPSS file, I guess, tutorials in this slide. I've left them in because if you like SPSS, you can follow the slides. And we're going to talk about how to name specific files as well later on. So in a perfect world, you need to keep this updated yeah, you need to make sure that you have as much detail as possible. And I'll talk a little bit more about the data logs and keeping everything neat. So let's move into Testable, all right? So on Testable's dashboard, you will see an experiment of interest, and on the right-hand side, you're going to see a drop-down and a fixed button. I'm going to show you an example in a second from one of my studies. So here you have the name of the study and the testable link, obviously. Mine's not active. And then over on this side, you see that I have 255 results. When I click on that button, it takes me to this, which is like the results file. And when you click the drop down, it gives you different options, including the download all option. So these are the different options. So the download all option gives you an Excel spreadsheet for each participant. It's very annoying. I don't know at what point you would need this, unless maybe you're going in to see a specific participant and you just want to see their data. But I mean, the data from here is available in all other formats. So for whatever reason, if you need each participant to have its own Excel file, that's what you would do. And the data in this version is logged as, it will have like the participant name and then all their data down in rows. And it's accompanied by the same rows as your trial file. So for example, if your questionnaire is row 3 to 7 in your trial file, then in the all results format, the participants' data will also reflect that. So I guess it's just an ease of seeing. I've bolded the ones that you guys are probably going to be downloading the most, because download wide is where it's one Excel file, all your participants are rows, and all your data are columns. And that's what SPSS and Testable want, right? You guys have all opened files in SPSS and Testable, and all your participants are down the long side, and all your data points, like all your trials, are along the columns. I'll talk about the bottom one in a moment, but wide is ideal for SPSS and Jamovi. Long is the opposite. So it's one Excel file, but all your participants are in columns and all your data are in rows. If you're doing certain analyses in R, R can handle both versions of these, but I know that Julia has been running her data using the long format. So unless you're going to be using R. Yeah. Number 4 is self-explanatory. You can download everyone's proof of consent. My understanding of this is if you used Testable's consent function. So some people put their consent within their trial file, in which case that data will be in the output. Whereas I tend to use Testable's consent function in the settings, which means that you can download the consent form separate and it's not in your data file. Okay, so it depends on how you've set up your experiment, where the consent will be. Will it be in your output? Will it be in separate place where you need to download it and keep it? This is the same as the wide. I have noticed that when I've downloaded the wide anonymized data version, what happens is it also seems to download a folder that looks like this one. So it just gives it to you, even though you didn't ask for it. So just be aware that if you see when you download it, there's an extra file, it looks like it's just downloaded all as well. What you're interested in is that one Excel spreadsheet that it produces that has participants as rows, outputs as column. This is great if the data is going to be used by people not on your ethics. So for example, all of my data across my studies is open source. So other researchers can download off OSF my data. Now, of course, my data needs to be anonymous. So I would post this data, but I might analyze off of this data depending on what I need. So one of the main differences for me anyway is that this data has the Testable Minds ID. So I can make sure that my data is linked to a specific Testable Minds ID, whereas this one does not. So in your guys' cases, you might need to see information about your participant for the analysis. So you need to use this file. Whereas if you don't need to see the participant ID or anything like that, this data is fine to analyze. Any questions about that? All right. So
Sorry, Dana,
yes,
I was just going to quickly, Most of our data is not coming from Testable Minds, so it would be anonymous anyway, wouldn't it, if we haven't got...
Yeah, you can download both and just see what Testable is showing as the difference between them. There might not be any difference between these two. I guess it doesn't matter then, but just be aware that this one is supposed to be anonymized comparatively to that. But whether that actually occurs when you download it, yeah. But using these two, either one is the best for analyses, unless you're doing R. So when you actually click to download one, so you've gone, okay, I want to download wide. So you click the wide option, this window pops up, okay? And what this window is asking is, do you want to download a trial file? Do you want to download an output? And are there any user-defined columns? Now, because I've saved my trial files separately, I don't ask Testable to download the trial files, but you can in terms of I'll show in the next slide what you can do to kind of make it easier for yourself. I find it easier just to have my saved trial file, which again, you can download from Testable, and then look at my output file. I don't ask Testable to download it again, but I'll show you where this might be helpful for you, particularly if you have large data sets. So what I recommend doing is downloading your results with all of this ticked, and then you save it. And that is your untouched data. Like, it is not going to be touched. It is just saved with every single possibility that Testable has to offer. You want to make sure you tick this bottom box, use labels as columns, and I'll explain why in the next slides. It won't make much sense now, but it just helps you find your data easily. So make sure that your first data file you save is all of these ticked, and that's ticked, and you download. And it will download whatever you've selected. So if you've selected download wide, it will download one Excel sheet with all of this information. Then what you're going to do, so I would call this the all output. Then you can select just your key output. The reason being is most of us are not going to care about things like the presentation time. That's already set. You guys already know what you set your presentation time as. You don't need an output for that. Does everyone understand? Like, that's not a key output. In Testable, most of us are going to be using the 4 bottom ones. The reason being is response and response code are usually for questionnaires. Reaction time, if you use it, I never looked at my reaction time, so I didn't have that data, but you might need the reaction times. And then the correct is usually for experimental tasks, right? Did they get the answer correct or not? So in an emotion labeling task, did they select the correct emotion? They would be coded 1 for yes, 0 for not correct. So you might need a total score for a task, and that's the column that you use. So these are your 4 main ones that you're going to want to have as your key output. And that means that Testable doesn't flood you with all information that's not relevant, which is this top information. What you can do on the trial file side is tell Testable to just give you a trial file with these ones, and it just helps you, I guess, with organizing and viewing things. In all honesty, I just use the full trial file. I'll show you how I do it with a full trial file. It's really easy. I don't use this function, but if you use it and you like it, go ahead and use the function of it. So that's how you download your data. Once it's downloaded, you will open your Excel file, and there's a lot happening on this sheet. So can you guys all see my mouse? Thumbs up if you can see my mouse on screen. Yeah. Okay. So this is just some data I have, right? And what you see here is row 57. Okay. So the participant in row 57, this is actually an emotion labeling data set. So what's happened here is in row 57, participant 1, this participant, which is row 2, they gave a response of 1, which someone remind me in the emotion labeling, is that happy? I think that's happy from memory, potentially. But in the emotion labeling, whatever option 1 was, which might be the happy emotion, they selected 1. That was their reaction time. That was how correct it was. Yeah, so it was correct. So everyone who selected 1 should have, hold on, why is this being weird? That's weird. I don't know if I accidentally changed that column there because it looks like it's actually 2 that's correct here. So I may have accidentally changed that cell. I will fix that in my slides for you guys. What I'm trying to say is that see how everyone chose different responses? Only 2, so as you can see here, it's actually 2, should be correct. Yeah? If anyone selected a different option, like someone selected 5, which is probably like disgust or surprised, they got it wrong. Yeah? This person timed out. So they did not select an answer in time and they got an automatic 0. So that's how you're reading this spreadsheet. And this is just 1 item. So this is row 57 on your spreadsheet. It's 1 item. And then you would go to the next row. So you can see how your data file is going to look ginormous, because if you have 48 trials, you're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 outcomes per trial, right? And that's just 1 task. So this is where you're going to have to start cleaning your data as well and deciding what is beneficial and what's not, okay? More on this in a bit. So as I mentioned, you need to keep a raw, untouched version of your data. So you can have a untouched all output and an untouched key output. The reason being is something catastrophically goes wrong. For example, potentially you put a number in the cell. I don't know how that 1 went in there and said that it was correct. It must have been something I did. You have a saved file where you can go back and check, right? So I can go back and check, did I accidentally put a 1 in that column, or is something going on with Testable? Is something going on with the participant? What's going on here? So by having that untouched version, you've got a clean slate you can go back to. Don't trust Testable to always have your files. It's an online system. You never know what's going to happen with Testable. So just have it saved to your computer, that untouched file. Needs to be saved in a separate folder. I literally have a folder that says untouched, and then I have a cleaned folder, and then I have my analyses folders as well. So I separate my analyses by program. So I have a Jamovi based folder, an SPSS, and an Amos based folder. So I keep everything organized that way. So I do like untouched, cleaned, which all my cleaned are Excel files, and then Jamovi, and so on and so forth. So that way, if I go, okay, I need to go see my Jamovi analysis, I go into my Jamovi file. You need to know Excel. For testable files, you probably don't need these Excel shortcuts, but Poppy, it might be beneficial to you because you're not using a program like Testable, which is going to sort your data. So we're still going to go through the functions. We're not going to go in depth through this workshop, but I will give you the instructions and everything you need to know in folders for you. So one thing you can use is a macro. So macros can sort your data. So back in 2020, Romina sent me some Testable data, and back then Testable only gave you the all version. So every participant had a single Excel file and you had to copy their data from there across to a single spreadsheet. Me, stupidly, as a new PhD student, did it by hand. It took me 8 hours and I probably made mistakes, right? Because I'm human. Then I found out Ellen had created a macro to do all the work for her. So she had spent 2 hours developing a macro, which basically went into every individual spreadsheet, took the cell and data that it wanted, pulled it to a new Excel spreadsheet and put it in the correct format. Does that make sense to everyone? So the macro did all the work for her, and all she had to do was check that it did pull the right cells at the right points and all of that. Luckily, the data that I got from Romina was just to test a hypothesis before I went ahead and planned my experiment. So I wasn't actually using Romina's data, but it was still annoying. So you can use macros to pull data from different sheets and get it to sort and organize it for you. Testable does this. So that's the download wide format. It already sorts all the data for you guys. Okay. But Poppy, this might be useful for you if you have a situation where you need to pull data across files. So I have an instruction on how to do this. So we're not going to run through this workshop because the majority of you are Testable people. But there is a folder. I will share it with everyone so you can see. Okay, so we also have a way of compiling data sets, so using a function called VLOOKUP. So when you do this function, make sure your headings are very clearly labeled. So you can't use the unclean testable files, because as you saw, the unclean testable files are like row 57 output or whatever. You wouldn't have to have renamed them already. You can use R to help you compile data as well. I've never done that, but you can find videos online. And you can also use VLOOKUPs. So in the zip folder, you'll have an instruction sheet. So it's a Word instruction sheet. And what it's trying to explain is, imagine you have an Excel spreadsheet where the participants are ordered like 1 through 255, right? In correct order. And then you open another Excel spreadsheet, and for whatever reason, maybe the participants aren't in the right order. You're not just going to copy data across, because it's not actually synced with the right participant. Does that make sense? And you need to compile them all into the one Excel spreadsheet. So instead of sitting there and scrolling through to try and find like where the participant is and where their data is and putting it into a master file, you can use VLOOKUP. So what VLOOKUP does is, if you look here, it has a function. So the function is that you tell Excel where the source data is. So let's say it's participant, maybe the name of the cell is P1 or 001, okay? And then on the other Excel spreadsheet, it's also P001, remembering that they're in different orders in the Excel sheet. You tell it that these two sources are the same. So that's source 1 and source 2. And then you also tell it what cells you want it to pull across, right? So basically, VLOOKUP calls a function. This tells you where the codes are stored, so the participant ID. So that's in that spreadsheet where the participant ID is, and that's in that spreadsheet where it is. And then you also have to tell it where the value of interest is, the column of where it is, and you tell it that it is not necessarily in the same order, Excel. So please make sure to it's not in the same order. And then what it does is it will copy data from one spreadsheet to another. Now, I haven't tried this across Excel windows, so just make sure that your spreadsheets are the little tabs in Excel. So have you guys received the email yet?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so you guys can see this yourself. So if you guys can all go into the Excel spreadsheet on your computer, or if you want to just watch me on mine. So what I'm saying is that I've only ever done this trick with tabs or sheets, I think Excel calls them, in one Excel workbook. So I don't know if Excel is smart enough to pull from a different workbook. I believe the VLOOKUP is only for the sheets, okay? So what you need to do is make sure that if you have different data, that you put it in the sheets. So here we have source 1 with our participant codes there, and source 2 with our participant codes here. Now, in this example, they are in the exact order, but you can actually, if you want to play around with it, move these guys into a different order. Obviously, take with them the code, the data. And what you're going to do is compile these all into one. So you want to know the number of 90-second trials, the number of 50-second trials, and also the year. So you can see that there's data across different spreadsheets. And what we're going to do is get VLOOKUP to actually actually compile it into one spreadsheet. So here is an example. And what you can do is tell it in Excel, you can drag from the little square downwards and it will do the VLOOKUP. And you can check that it's doing the correct thing here. I don't know why. Oh, it does. So here it's saying that in column A, see the source is column A. When I click on it, it highlights it. So here it's pulling from the column A's where all the participant data is. I'm telling it that in source 2, right, because this is years in Australia, that's where my data is. It's in source 2, everyone following? And so I'm telling it, can you please pull from the sheet, source 2, down here, and I want you to pull column A and B. I want you to look at column A. I'm going to start editing this document now. I want you to look at column A, and that's its data there. And I want you to compile it into this sheet here. Okay? And the participant data might not be in order. All right? And then what it's done is it's copying across all the data. And what you can actually do is you can drag the whole functions down as well. Yeah. So what it's actually doing is, let's say this one was backwards. Everyone was in the reversed order. You don't want this participant's data 2 years to be on this participant's data or vice versa, right? Because they're in different orders. So Excel will make sure that the data, the participant ID here matches the participant ID here before it copies it across. Is everyone okay with that? So obviously in this example, there should be no reason why I can't just copy the cell, right? Because they're all in the same order. So what VLOOKUP does is make sure that if the participants weren't in the same order across spreadsheets, that you're actually putting the data with the correct participant ID. Now, for Testable, this doesn't matter because it's all in one Excel spreadsheet. It's already compiled, but I just wanted to show you guys this function in case, well, in Poppy's case, don't know if it's, you've got data across different spreadsheets that you need to compile. This is a helpful thing to do instead of doing copy and paste. Everyone okay with that? The instructions are all in the Word. I've tried to make them as clear as possible so that you guys can follow. You can also play around with this spreadsheet so that you can see what to do. Or what Excel does, should I say. You also have the if function. So if you guys can open that one up as well, I'll go back out so you guys can see it on my screen as well. So if you go to the folder with the example if function, you have the instructions in Word for you there. And then you have this. So what we're doing in this file is we're checking if the order of trials is correct. Okay, so you might need to check 2 columns that they're the same, or that I mean, in the case of Testable has already made sure that your data is compiled correctly. You might want to check it yourself just to make sure. But what you can do is check the order of the trials. So for example, this is a column for which this is the trial that it's saying, whereas this one is maybe the order of the trials in the results sheet, potentially, right? And making sure that they actually match, like from the results to the trial file, for example, if you had this set up. And what you can do is you can tell it using an if function, if AB7, so AB7 is this one here, through to AB 454, so that's a lot of rows here. If it says correct, then you should have a yes. So this is the number of files that are correct. So if all of these are there, so if there's 448 corrects, then there will be a yes here. If there is a cell that is an error, then it will change. So watch what happens. I'm going to change this file. Actually, I'll change this one to happy. And now Excel has warned me that they are not the same. So here, what it's checking is, does this equal this? If it's a no, it says error, check output. And now, because I have less than 448 corrects, I now have only 447 corrects and 1 error. It's telling me that something's wrong in my data file. Now, it's easy to see where the error is, but you can imagine if it happened somewhere down here that you wouldn't be able to see unless you scroll. So having this box here lets you know that something in your 448 is wrong. Go and find it. Does everyone understand? And what you do is in Excel, you tell it the function at the start, and then you drag the function down. So Ellen made this spreadsheet. She didn't go ahead and write this code in every single 448 cell, okay? She wrote the code in the first cell, and then she dragged it down so that Excel copied the function for all of her tasks there, right? And that's how the function continues. Because Excel's smart enough to know that it's still Z and AA. It's just the row is going to be different. Is everyone okay with that? So please don't sit there and type out by hand your function in every single cell. You use the drag down function to tell Excel. So if some of them are missing, right, all you have to do is tell Excel that it needs to copy the function down. Everyone okay with that? So this is how you can check for errors without you yourself going through and being like, yeah, that's the same, that's the same, that's the same, and taking forever. Let Excel do it for you. So that's the if function. So again, you have an example, and you also have instructions if you want to do it yourself. Okay, let's flow back into Testable itself. So Testable, when you save your data, make sure that you keep your untouched data. So you've downloaded your key results, then you save that key results in an untouched file, then you click Save As, and you save a different file name. Do not edit your untouched files. There's different ways to format your file name. So one of the common ones is this, right? I am a fan of this one, but I do have people that are viewing my data files who are not from Australia, right? So they're American. So if I use this function and don't specify in some sort of README that my files are dated month, day, the Americans who look at the files might get confused. Because if I run data on the 12th of May, I would put it as 0512, and what happens is they might think that I'm running it in December, the 5th of December. Okay, so instead I prefer to do my data files like this. And the reason you have to have these numbers in brackets here is that you actually want your computer to put it in order. Because what happens is if you don't put a number and I just put September, February, May, your months aren't actually in order of, you know, the alphabet, right? So December is going to end up at the top of your file somewhere under D. when you need December down the bottom. So you can see here that this is Jamovi examples. So in Jamovi, when I open my Jamovi folder, all of my older versions are at the top because they were done earlier in the year, right down through to my most recent ones. I've also labeled them. So this is my Jamovi file that is going to be exported to Amos. This is my Jamovi file that's specific to my emotion subtests. This is my Jamovi file, and you can see I'm just clearly labeling them. Kate and Linda might require you guys to have initials at the end of your files to differentiate your different files. I don't know if that's what they would want, but they might want that. I don't obviously initial. Yeah, put your name on it somehow. So obviously, yeah, put your name on it. So if you do an underscore, I would do DW. You can do an underscore Poppy or Bridget or Jacob after it. So at least if Kate's getting a bulk load of data, she knows whose it's coming from. Or if Linda's getting all the data, she knows who it's coming from. And people don't get confused because you might unintentionally name your folders the same. Right, everyone okay with that? So when you save your data files, make sure they are clearly labeled, and you can have a little README if you want to follow this format and think someone from a different country is going to get confused. But if they're Australian, they should know it's month day, or at least maybe see from the rest of the files it's month day. Okay, so you've got your testable data, you're ready to analyze it. You need to open your trial file, because your trial file tells you where your output data is going to be. And I'm going to show you what this looks like. So you open your trial file, your final version of your trial file that you use. You can download that from Testable. And you open your, I guess, key output file or all output file, depending on what you're using. And you need to match your rows across. So let's take a look at an example from my third study. There's a lot going on here, so follow my pointer. This is my trial file. So you can see here, I have all my rows and my experiment flows from row 1 all the way down to row, whatever, 400 and something. So what Testable will do is it will tell me the row where my data is. So where there's instructions, I won't have output for those rows. So those rows will be missing in my output folder. Does that make sense to everyone? So my data folder won't have a column that says row 2. Why? Because it's an instruction row and Testable is like, we're not going to give it to you. If you have any practice rows, they will be displayed there, any forms as well. So what you see here is my AQ. So my AQ is formatted in a way that it appears in a table, and that's why it looks very short, because of how I formatted my AQ. All right. So this is starting from row 7 to 9. Then there will be like a gap in data, like it won't be there, the rows. And then my experimental task, the Mooney task, starts in row 19. So I need to remember this. So I usually have a little book that I write down like, okay, Mooney is starting at row 19 to row whatever. Scroll down, find where it stops. Does that make sense to everyone? You need to make sure you know where your tasks and questionnaires start and end in your trial file by row. And that's Excel row, okay? All right. Then I go over to my output folder, and what you'll see is up here are the rows. So obviously those are all my demographics. This file has some duration data in it, and you'll notice it starts at row 7. Why? Because in my file, all the things preceding row 7 were all instructions. So obviously it's only giving me data from row 7 onwards. So row 7 to row 9, yeah, is my questionnaire. So I'm like, great, here's my questionnaire. Don't get scared at the moment because it looks really intimidating, but I'll show you what to do if your data looks like this. So there's my questionnaire, and you'll notice that straight after my questionnaire, it jumps to row 19. The reason being is in this file, it has excluded my practice task for my Mooney, unless the practice started at row 19. No, it was my test, right? But you can get the data for your practice if you need it, like if you need to see if they practice correctly. So that means that I'm only going to get the data that I'm interested in. And yeah, so for row 19 onwards, back here, sorry. So here, row 19 onwards is all my Mooney. And really, for me, I'm only going to be interested in the correct. All I care about is, did they detect a face or not? We decided not to analyze the reaction times, but I potentially could. It's there. But in my final data, I just care about this row. So I'm going to ignore row 19 reaction time, row 19 response, which is the only other blank column. Okay. All right. Everyone kind of following how to look at your output. So this is what your output's going to look like. Obviously, it's going to be quite long because it's going to give you every single row. What you guys are going to do when you clean your data is remove any columns that are not applicable. So for example, I would go through and just right click on AG and delete that entire row. Why? Because it's blank and I don't need it. I also then right click on reaction time and I remove it because I don't need my reaction time. And what will happen is my Excel spreadsheet, the cleaning version of it, will get smaller and smaller and smaller because I'm removing all the columns, sorry, not rows, all the columns that are not useful to me. So eventually, I'll show you what a clean data set looks like, but I'm just going to remove the data I'm not interested in. But I still have my saved, pure, untouched version in case my supervisor turns around and goes, wait, we need to analyze the reaction times. I can go back and get that. And I can use like a VLOOKUP, for example, to copy the data across so that, yeah, rather than going and copying columns. So you might care about the response code column in the AQ questionnaire because obviously there's no correct or incorrect answer in a questionnaire, but instead I'm interested in what they put as their response, right? Questionnaires and tasks are designed in every different experiment. Okay, so what you saw as my output for my questionnaire is specific to my questionnaire. For example, in Kate's honours, not Kate's honours, in Kate's 3-3-10 experiment, the questionnaires are set up very differently to how I set them up in my study. What that means is the output will look very different. And I wanted to show you guys an example. So here is the questionnaire output when the trial files has rows for each questionnaire. So Kate, in our 3-3-10 unit, this is what our data is going to look like because we set it up so that every questionnaire has its own row in the trial file. So this is like AQ question 1. This is AQ question 2. This is AQ question, oh, sorry, rows that way, columns. So this is AQ question 1, AQ question 2, AQ question 3. Does everyone understand? And these are the responses for each participant.
I think that's what the honours one looks like too.
Yeah, so you guys will have, I guess, an easier time because all you're going to do is delete all the rows that you don't care about and keep the actual response, right?
Columns,
so you,
deleting columns.
Thank you, columns that you want. Whereas because I set my questionnaire AQ question up as a table, all my responses are in one cell for that amount of questionnaires and separated by underscores. So this one participant answered 2, 4, 5, 3, 2, so on and so forth. Yeah. Excel will sort this all out for me, but just be aware that if your data doesn't look like this and looks like this, it's fine. It's just how you've done your trial file. So I will give you the instructions for how to convert this if you have this, but I don't think anyone here has this. But if you ever set up your trial file like I did with my AQ, which is more of a MTurk format with the tables, you can easily change your data. So what you're going to do is once you've deleted the columns that you don't want, you'll need to rename your columns. You're not going to leave it as row 57 underscore correct, right? So you need to rename them. So you can talk to your supervisors about what might be easier, or they might just say, listen, name them what you think is logical. I like to use the task name and then the trial number. So in this case, it's AQ_1, meaning the AQ question 1. Remembering that some of them might be reverse scored. So what you can do as well is do AQ_1_R. Yeah. So does that make sense to everyone? You're going to rename your files, and they should look really neat afterwards and nice and clean. So here's an example from my study. Look how neat that is. I have all of my responses for my questionnaire here. So every participant has an answer for question 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth for the AQ. You'll see here I haven't put _R in them because what I do is I like to reverse score in Jamovi. And when I reverse score in Jamovi, I let Jamovi know that it's a reverse scored item rather than doing it in Excel. But it's up to you. If you use a function to reverse score in Excel, just make sure that you note that that column is a reverse scored column. Okay. Here's the experimental task. So I just took a screenshot of my motion labeling from my study 3, and you'll see here it ends off with the CFMT. So the CCMT, which has different stages or different conditions. So I've also made sure to tell myself what condition it was. So this is the end of the novel condition for the CCMT, and then the emotion labeling is just labeled. Everyone good with that? Okay, brilliant. And as you can see here, this is because it's Leichhardt, that's why it's formatted like that. And this is incorrect and correct, which is binary code, 1 and 0s. So what you want to make sure when you're importing to SPSS and Jamovi is that you have the correct data type in there. Okay. Now on the slide, it says don't mix numbers with words. If you are a Jamovi user like me, you can ignore that advice. If you are an SPSS user, you need to take that advice seriously. And I'll show you an example because I actually showed you. So what you can do is if you're going to be using SPSS and you need to analyze, I guess, word data like male, female, other, you can tell Excel to replace the word male and female with binary code or numbers, right? Or if you have multiple different outputs for gender. So if you have other or anything like that, you can do it 0, 1, 2. Hint, make sure you replace the word female first. Otherwise, if you tell Excel to replace male, every male in the spreadsheet with a 1, it will change your female words to be, so in this case, 0. I got them mixed up here, but you guys understand. It will look for the male in the word female and change it to 0. And then you are going to have to, I guess, tell it, okay, FE0 is actually going to be 1, for example. So just remember that the word male appears in the word female and Excel can't tell the difference between that. So make sure you change female first, because then that's out the way, and then all that's left is male in the spreadsheet and it will change it. Word does the same thing, if you're wondering, sometimes. You can also do this for education level. So if you have obviously words for education like masters, bachelors and all of that, you can code it into, dummy code it into 1s and 0s and all of that. Now, just a side note, you guys would have been given an example README. When you start changing things in an Excel spreadsheet, so if you start changing things in Jamovi, you just need to make sure it's in your data log. But if you start changing things in an Excel spreadsheet, you can create a legend by opening a new sheet. And this tells anyone like Kate or Linda who open your document what you've been doing in that document. Because it's all well and good if you know what 1 and 0 are, right? But as you can tell in the last one, like I sometimes code male as 1 and 0. And then when I did my example, I did it the opposite way. So you don't know if 1 is female and 0 is male. So you need to make, here's an example. it clear what it is. So some people put it in their actual heading of their data, and other people just make sure there's a legend so you can tell. Everyone okay with that? So legends are great for people who don't live in your mind and don't know what you're doing, which is pretty much
it's also
everyone.
good when I come back to my mind in 3 weeks' time and I can't remember what I did.
Yes. So let's look at SPSS. I'm going to flick through this because I don't know if anyone else is a huge Jamovi fan like me, or if everyone's a huge Jamovi fan, or who's an SPSS fan. But
nobody is an SPSS fan.
But I will flick through it because you never know when you need to do an SPSS data, whatever.
We're all SPSS over here at Curtin, I think. So
I
think that's me.
Oh.
But would you call yourself a fan?
No.
Okay. So I am a Jamovi user and fan. You may be a Jamovi fan, but you have to be using SPSS. So that's why I'm glad I left the SPSS things in, because I was debating like, oh, this is so old school. Who would do this still? But apparently we still use SPSS. I've only ever used it for Amos because that's obviously modeling. But yeah. Okay, so here's fake data. So here we have some participants and can you guys notice something wrong with this data set? Anyone notice something? Yeah.
There's dots.
There's dots. And can anyone tell me where they think, other than the dots, where the missing information is?
999.
Yeah. So some people code 999 in their Excel spreadsheet. So when they go through their Excel spreadsheet, whenever they see blank spots, instead of leaving it blank, they put 999 in. That's a common convention. So what will happen if you run descriptives on this, right? Oh, sorry, we'll talk about the descriptors after. Let's talk first about the dummy coding. So here we have in the title, it's telling me that males are 1. So I'm presuming that all the zeros are females if we're just doing male and female coding here, right? Most of us have others, like an other option as well. So that's where it gets a bit confusing. You need to make sure that you tell, because I don't know if 3 is an other, is 3 a female, what's going on here. What you can do in SPSS is you can label it, right? So you can use the labeling function to tell anyone who looks at your SPSS file and yourself and SPSS, hey, 0 is equal to female and 1 is equal to male. Okay, so you can tell SPSS, please do this. And then everyone who looks in your variable view, which is this view, this is what the label is. Okay, everyone okay with that for SPSS? So instead of having male, male, female, so on and so forth, it will code it that way. Okay. So when we look at Jamovi, this is a Jamovi clipping from my study 3, I believe it is. So what you can see here is I don't need to change it into binary for Jamovi to analyze it. So SPSS will not analyze your male and female like this, as far as I'm aware, unless it's had an update. SPSS really likes it being dummy coded. Anyone used SPSS and kept it as words and it worked? Because last time I did it, it really hated me. So you need to make sure these are 1s and 0s for SPSS to actually give you like descriptors and stats on it. Jamovi does not care. In Jamovi, or Jamovi users, what you do is you run your descriptives, you put your variable in as the testable minds code or your participant code. So you need a code for Jamovi, and you're going to split by education. This is how I get my totals. I'm just showing you how I get my totals, right? But you can split by male and female and all sorts of stuff in Jamovi. So here you can see a tally based upon my testable minds codes, how many people are in each area and how many are missing and so on and so forth. Everyone okay with that? And you can do that for sex. So the reason you put the MINDS code in, which is, again, why I like to analyze my data with some sort of participant code, right? But then when I post it, that data is not there. So everyone okay with that? This is how I run my totals for like male and female and all of that. Jamovi rules for this sort of thing. So SPSS, you can assign value labels in the variable view. Jamovi, there's no need. But if you want to, you can use the Excel replace and then move it into Jamovi. It's up to you. Make sure that you check your data type is correct. So in Jamovi, you have different data types. So you have nominal, ordinal, continuous, and I believe SPSS has the same functions. Please make sure that you put it in the right data type. If you're not sure, Google it. Yes, so make sure that, and also that you're displaying the correct number of decimal places as well. Jamovi, I believe for Jamovi, I don't think it really cares unless you care. So make sure when you import it, if you care about the number of decimal places, that when you import it, it has the correct number of decimal places. And in SPSS, you can obviously, same thing. If you care about 3 decimal places and you import 2, of course, SPSS can't figure out what the third decimal place is. So just make sure that you put it in as much decimal places as you care about. Make sure that your data has gone in correctly. So take the means. You can also run means on Excel. I haven't shown you how to do this, but it's very simple. You just tell the function average. So you can actually do a quick average in your Excel file for like a column and then check Jamovi got the same thing. And that will tell you that your import to Jamovi or SPSS actually worked correctly. So you can quickly do that. SPSS doesn't really like missing variables or missing data, sorry. So you need to dummy code your missing as either like 999. Jamovi handles it perfectly fine. I'll show you how. So again, we're going back to the data. Here's the missing data from this one. When you run it, SPSS is like, yeah, 999 is an actual value. It doesn't know it's a dummy code, right? So now everything is screwed up. I don't think anyone gets 999 hours of sleep, right? Maybe in your lifetime, potentially, but not in this data set, okay? So here's the variable view here. So you can dummy code the missing variables and let it know that it's dummy coded. Where am I looking? It's probably the next page. Yeah, there we go. So when you click on missing values, you tell it that 999 is a missing value, okay? Like it's not real data. Then when you run your descriptives, everything is fine because it knows that 999 is not a valid data point. It is a dummy code. Jamovi, handles it perfectly well. Here's some missing data, like literally blank spaces. And this is a different data set. I just created this quickly in Jamovi because I didn't have the other data. But you can see that Jamovi handled it pretty well. If you want to code Jamovi with 999, again, it will think it's legit unless you tell it that it's not. So you open up the variable view. So you double click on this. You click on missing values, it will open a window. You tell Jamovi if the source is equal to 999, that's a missing value. Yeah, Jamovi goes, cool, that sounds good, let me grey it out. And that's Jamovi saying, I understand that's a missing value. Or you can leave the box blank because Jamovi handles that perfectly fine. But if you're importing an Excel spreadsheet that already has things coded as 999, because it's missing, then obviously use this trick. People should be able to come back to your data files and run your analyses super easy. They shouldn't be looking at it like it's some kind of mysterious exercise that you were doing, right? Everything should be clear. In SPSS, you have your syntax, okay? So you can annotate your syntax. I'll show you how. With Jamovi, you have your analyses in your files, right? So it's very clear what analyses I run in Jamovi because it's all listed very, very clear here. People can see what I've done, and I just rename the file. So for example, I'll call it like that analysis, I'll rename to like AQ reliability, and then it will have the AQ reliability. Then the next analysis I rename to Mooney reliability, for example. So everyone going in can easily see what I've done in Jamovi. So here we have SPSS generating descriptives. This is the syntax that SPSS produces. And of course, you can kind of, if you know syntax, you know what SPSS is doing, but it's much better to annotate it. So SPSS users, you just use the, I guess, asterisk, star, whatever you want to call it, command, and you can annotate it. And when you rerun analysis using the syntax, it won't read your annotation as a line of code. So don't worry about it failing to run the analysis because you've added data or code in, because if you make sure that it's gray and it's under the star function, it won't read it as code. It's just for you as a user note. Everyone okay with that? So you can annotate. So here it says compare scores across conditions, right? And you can even annotate to tell me what conditions they were. Yeah? So everyone can clearly see what you've done. I just showed you Jamovi. Here's Jamovi. I ran my descriptors. I can rename these to like whatever I want to rename them. So Jamovi has everything in there and it doesn't give you a syntax. All right, so make sure to use a data logbook, okay? Why you did the analysis, what data sheet you analyzed, refer to the file name, what analysis you used. If you've saved syntax, refer to the syntax file. So SPSS users, if you decide that you want to do something different, you have to run the syntax again. Jamovi users, we just open the data file, we double click on the analysis that we did wrong or whatever, and we just manipulate it in Jamovi, whereas SPSS doesn't allow you to do that. It's like, no, you need to rerun everything and tell me again what you need me to do. So you might want to have your syntax saved and then rerun them and then edit your syntax with different codes if you know how to edit a syntax, or you can just, again, rerun the analysis the way you want it and save that syntax as a separate syntax. But you need to make sure you're clearly telling us what you do. So for example, if on the same day you ran 2 different t-tests, but they're distinctly different t-tests, you might have 2 different syntax, okay? But you need to clearly label which one is the one you went with, because in a couple of weeks' time, when you have amnesia, because we all seem to forget what we've done, even if it's only a couple of weeks ago, you need to tell yourself what analysis you did, why you did it, which one you're going with, and why you're going with that analysis. Jamovi users, I tend to just save a new Jamovi file. So if I've run a t-test one day with Jamovi and I'm happy with that t-test, and then for whatever reason someone comes back to me and says, like, do another t-test, I prefer to actually open a new Jamovi file and rename it, but you can run it in the same Jamovi file, obviously, but just relabel the t-test underneath. But make sure you log it in your data file, that it's in the same Jamovi file, but it's like the one labeled t-test v2 is the one that we are comfortable reporting on. Okay. Make sure that you summarize any key outputs. Keep a running commentary. Nothing is ever too much to write about. So yeah, if you want kind of an example, I think I grabbed an example to show you guys. So this is, I hope you guys can see. This is actually my data log for compiling my data, what I did, why I did it, and then I have some Jamovi analyses in here and the file name and all of that. So what I'm doing here is I'm giving myself a rundown. As you can note up the top, there was an error in Testable scoring. Don't panic. This was not Testable's fault. It was my fault. If you read my note, you'll see what I did. I accidentally told Testable that 1 was the correct answer. So everyone got that question wrong. And I was so confused when I was looking at my data, like, how did everyone get that question wrong? Now, it was a distractor question. So basically it was, I know this is, I'm laughing because it's so silly. Basically, it was an arithmetic. It was like 5 plus 8. And I had put in the wrong value. Obviously, I couldn't do maths that day. So all the participants said the correct answer, but because I told Testable 5 plus 8 was 9, everyone got it wrong, but it was actually me who had told Testable the wrong answer. So it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things because it's a distractor item. I don't care about that data, but I need to fix it. And because I fixed it, I needed to tell myself, why would that column be different in my untouched version to my clean data version? Everyone okay with that? So make sure you're very detailed, because I honestly do not remember what I did with my data, particularly in my older studies or anything like that. So you want to have everything really clear. Whoops, sorry guys. So that if a supervisor comes back to you and says, listen, why is this like this? You can go back to your notes and say, well, this is why. Because if you can't give them a reason, they'll probably say to you, go back and do it again, because I don't trust what you're doing if you don't have any notes on it. Yeah. All right. So, yes, Kate.
So just at the moment, so you've done the Testable and you've got like a column for each, say, question for the AQ. Are you calculating like an overall score for the AQ in Excel, or would you do that in Jamovi or SPSS?
Right. So I can show you guys an example. I think that might be easier to show, Kate. So I do have some data here. And this is publicly available data that I'm showing you guys because I open source my data. Where is it? Okay, so this here is this is what I do. Again, everyone is different, so everyone can do it their own way. But this is what I do. So this is a compiled, clean data set for my study. So what you see here is my AQ is listed across the top. These are the untouched AQ values. So these are not reverse scored. So for example, it looks like, it's hard to kind of see, maybe 15 might be reverse scored, potentially not, or maybe 14. So what I'm saying is that I haven't reverse scored anything. So these are my Likert scales at the front. These are all my correct, incorrect, and so on and so forth. So what I do is I import this to Jamovi, and then I reverse score everything in Jamovi, and I compute all of my composite values in Jamovi. I prefer to use that over, but I will often come back and check Excel. I don't save the Excel files I check, I just check. So for example, I'll tell Excel to sum up, maybe not the AQ because I haven't reverse scored it, but like my Mooney, like I'll tell it, because I get a composite score for my Mooney, so that's like 48 items. So I'll tell Excel, can you please sum up like this participant's scores and give me a total, and then I'll go to Jamovi and see if Jamovi did the correct thing as well. So in Jamovi, SPSS will be very, very similar. I'll just open my data file for Jamovi. All right. So this is an example. I label everything. So anyone coming back into my data file, of course, I open source it. So what I do is I reverse score inside here. So I have the original and I also have the reverse score. I actually use the function in Jamovi. If anyone needs some assistance with how to reverse score in Jamovi, you actually transform it. And that's how you reverse score in here. And then I get Jamovi to, because what Jamovi does is it has a function similar to Excel in terms of its composites, like what you can do. So let's just go here. So this is my CFMT. I gave it a name. This is probably not the best example because the CFMT is confusing. Let's go with Mooney. Mooney's easy. Okay, so it's a percentage score here, and this is my actual composite. So what I told Mooney, oh my gosh, I'm getting the names wrong. Jamovi. What I told Jamovi is to sum up all of these cells here. Now, where Jamovi is not very good at is that you do have to do this kind of a bit by hand in terms of you have to double click on all the ones you're interested in. Whereas I guess Excel, you can just say sum and then highlight your cells. So in Excel, you're going to have an easier time. So it's up to you what you want to do. In all honesty, probably Excel is quicker, Kate, because you can literally create a new column, put the sum thing, and then just copy across the whole cell and then copy the function down.
I'd do it in Excel, but I was just wondering if it was easier or better or something to do.
In all honesty, for composites, I would say easier in Excel.
I guess you it's easier to overwrite a cell and make an error in Excel than in Jamovi, but I think it's clear it might be easier to do it in Excel.
It definitely is quicker to do it in Excel, definitely, with their drag and functions. I've just,
to be honest, I'd probably be doing it in both and just over checking everything, but
yeah. Because the problem is I could have accidentally missed one here.
Yeah, true.
Right? So I do always check in Excel, but I just don't save those Excel files, because if it's fine in Jamovi, I just don't want extra files confusing me. But yeah, so that's what you can do. And then I also told it to compute a percentage here. And basically I just did a simple, like Excel, just a simple formula. So yeah, so I do all of my analyses here. And then obviously Jamovi users will know everything is nice and neat and here. And as Jamovi users know, if you've done something and you go, oh crap, this is wrong, you just double click on the analysis. It's lagging a bit. And then you can tell it you can change things without having to run a whole new analysis. Yes. For Curtin students who are forced to use SPSS, like formally, you can also download Jamovi and do, like, you can cross-check using Jamovi if you wanted to, but it's up to you.
I just not that they aren't forced to use SPSS. That's just what they're familiar with.
I see.
But guys, Jamovi is free software you can download, so it is something you can consider. If you feel like that's something you want to do. You're also welcome to work with what you're familiar with.
Yeah, so we're allowed to abandon ship if we want, right? On SPSS? Yep. Okay, great.
Once you try Jamovi, you're never going to go back unless you're forced to, like me with Amos. And I'm forced to use SPSS just for an Amos analysis. Because Jamovi nowadays, with its modules, like, I doubt there's anything that it can't do that SPSS does. Like literally, because it uses R, its syntax is actually using R. So in the back end, it's actually using R code. So what they're trying to do is everything R can do, Jamovi can do with a user-friendly interface, because R is a pain in the butt. So as you can see, these are all the modules. So anyone who hasn't used Jamovi, if you want anything additional, so you can see here I have power analysis. This is not default. I needed to download the power analysis module. Same as they now have the structural equation modeling as well. I actually haven't tried the SEM on here, because the reason I use Amos for structural equation modeling is Amos is really good at like making things look pretty for publication. I think Jamovi would be a set, like, yeah, this is the picture I drew and this is the picture you get, deal with it. Whereas Amos is flexible. Yeah, any other questions? Or any comments from Linda and Kate that you want your students? Are they doing everything, Kate and Linda? Like downloading?
I'll download the things from Testable and send them through.
Yeah, it'll vary for mine. Some of my students have set up their own Testable and are running it. My BPsych students, I've set it up, so there's a bit of variation across my students.
Yeah, so some of them might not have to clean the data or sort it. It might come slightly cleaned and they just have to do the composites, for example, or
probably cleaning will be doing it 3 times, because we'll have 3 lots of data because it's in 3 different testables. But anyway,
yeah. So hopefully it's helpful.
The VLOOKUP might come in handy for that, making sure you've got the right columns going into the when you're trying to go across all 3.
Yeah. So VLOOKUP, is copying it across. Then you could probably use the if function to make sure that it's done it correctly, because you can use if across spreadsheets as well. But it needs to be in the one Excel worksheet from memory.
Yeah, so you probably have 3. Copy it into 3 different worksheets and then try.
Yeah, and then compile it into one worksheet, but then across different sheets, and then you might have a compiled sheet at the end.
Yeah, and Benazir's might look a bit different because Jacob and Amelia's are cloned, but Benazir's is slightly different because it's come from Curtin. So, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, we've probably just got a few slightly different parts in our trial file.
Yeah. So making sure, that's why I tried to emphasize that you need to download the trial file, because it's going to look different. I forgot to show you guys. I have it's in the file I sent everyone, just in case you decide that you want your questionnaires to look like MTurks, which is the table format. So here we go. So what that means is, you would have seen it in my trial file here. You guys here see that this is my questionnaire. It's literally 3 rows. And this is what the AQ is like, 40 something questions, no, 30, maybe 30 something questions, right? Or 28. I use the 28 version, that's right.
It's 50, so, I think, for ours. But,
yeah, so you can imagine in Kate, your trial file is going to be 50 rows.
Yeah.
Because how we programmed it is that every row is a question, whereas this is set up as a table in the experiment. So all of my output is now going to be in just 2 rows, because where is it? 2 columns, sorry. Which is there and there and there. So what you guys need to do, if you ever do this, is you need to follow this guide. It's an Excel guide, and basically you tell Excel that each of these variables with the underscores is actually its own data, and please put it into columns, and it will do it. Does that make sense to everyone? So you tell it, take the cell, take all of these numbers and put it into columns.
That's handy. I think some of the BPsych students, I think we've got a couple of questionnaires that might be in that format.
Yeah. The key is you need to make sure to leave blank columns, because what Excel does is it's not very smart, and it will take the data and just paste it across the spreadsheet. So if you have other data behind it, it's just going to overwrite the data and just be like, I don't know, that's what you wanted, right? So you're going to make sure that there's like blank cells. So if you have like 9 underscored data points, you need 9 blank columns next to it, so that when it pulls across. But Excel will do it all for me. That was one of the panic me and Myra had when we first started using Testable and did the table format. And it was actually Myra who came across it first and went, Dana, all my data is like in underscores and it's not in columns. And so we found Excel just has a really simple transformation process. So yeah, Kate, we're not going to have that problem, because with the individual rows, they're all going to
be your problem,
columns.
so I don't care.
So I was glad when you were like, yeah, let's not do a table, let's do it different rows. I was like, yes.
I don't need it to look like Qualtrics. That's fine.
Yeah. So, yeah. Any other
Pretty
questions?
much with Excel, like anything you want it to do, I just usually Google and watch YouTube videos. Like, it's the easiest way to. It can normally do most things you want it to do, and yeah, the easiest way I find is to watch nerds on YouTube showing me how to do it.
Exactly right. Excel is extremely beneficial, particularly if you've got data in Jamovi and you want it to do something and Jamovi's like, I can't do it. Then you need to go back to Excel because more than likely Excel has a function to do it. So Jamovi could not handle this. It would not handle this at all. But Excel was like, mate, I've got this. Hold my beer. I will put it into columns for you. So yeah, Excel is your friend, particularly if your data looks weird and you need it to look nice for SPSS or Jamovi, who sometimes get a bit picky. So yes, any issues at all, you're more than welcome to email me. If I've come across it, I might be able to help. Otherwise, Google's your friend. All right, brilliant. I will stop the recording somehow.